What if I told you an empire rose from a place with no cities, no stone walls, and no mercy? An empire forged by a boy who lost everything, food, family, even his name, and then bent a continent to his will. This is the untold story of the Mongol Empire's rise, and it begins with hunger, betrayal, and a promise whispered into the steppe wind. Stay with me until the end, because the turning point you'll hear, the single decision that transformed scattered tribes into an unstoppable storm, will change how you think about power, loyalty, and the very meaning of civilization. The Mongolian steppe is a teacher. It teaches speed, because if your horse lags, you die. It teaches silence, because the wind will carry your mistakes for miles. It teaches that survival is the first law, and that mercy is a luxury. Here, a child learns to ride before he can write, to shoot before he can speak in a court, to read only one book, the horizon. No empire is inevitable. It's assembled, choice by choice, oath by oath, bone by bone. And on this steppe, sometime around 1162, a boy named Temüjin was born into the Borjigin clan. He did not arrive with a crown. He arrived with a tight fist and a father who would not live long enough to teach him all the rules. His father, Yesugei, a minor chieftain, was poisoned by rivals, Tatars, after escorting his son to arrange a marriage. Poison is a political language on the steppe. When Yesugei died, Temüjin was about 9, and his family, Mother Hörlun, brothers and sisters, were cast out by their own kin. Cast out not just to poverty, but to winter. They ate wild roots. They trapped small animals. They learned to live with less than nothing. And Temüjin learned the first rule of power. Help is not coming. If you want tomorrow, you take it. A rival clan, the Taichiud, captured Temüjin and fixed him with a kang, a wooden yoke that announces your helplessness to the world. But helplessness is a story we tell ourselves. One night, Temüjin slipped his bonds, fled into the river reeds, and with the help of a sympathetic household, vanished back into the dark. It wasn't just a jailbreak, it was a vow, never again. From this moment, he gathered people the way the wind gathers sparks, outcasts, the poor, the ignored. Not with promises of glory, with something rarer on the steppe, predictable rewards and punishments that didn't care who your father was. Temüjin married Berta, his chosen companion, equal parts partner, counsel, and anchor. But the Merkit, old enemies of his father, raided and stole her away. On the steppe, love is not a poem, it's a campaign. Temüjin called on two powerful allies, his blood brother Jamukha and Togrul, also known as Khan, leader of the Kharate. They struck the Merkit like a thunderclap. Berta returned, and Temüjin learned the second rule of power. Make your allies feel like your victory is theirs. Reward them, honor them. Use respect like a whetstone. It sharpens every blade in your hand. Jamukha was Temüjin's Anda, sworn brother. Their bond was a fire lit in youth. But memory is not policy. Jamukha represented the old aristocratic way, the noble lineages that expected deference, that counted power in ancestry. Temüjin was inventing something new, power that flowed downward and outward through loyalty and merit, through the humblest herder elevated because he delivered under pressure. As Temüjin gathered followers, the old guard felt something slipping, not just authority, identity. They saw in this rising leader a threat, not because he broke rules, but because he rewrote them. And rewriting rules, as every aristocracy knows, is a mortal sin.
Temüjin built trust the way a carpenter builds a fortress, plank by plank. He created units that mixed men from different tribes, so no soldier fought only for his kin. If your captain ordered a retreat, you retreated.
If you ordered a charge, you charged. Disobedience was not a misunderstanding, it was treason. Rewards were real: horses, plunder, honor, and so were consequences. In a land of shifting sands, he made the ground solid. He punished kidnappers and rapists even when they were his allies. He returned stolen wives and daughters to their families. On a landscape where women were often bargaining chips, he made protection of the household a public law. People noticed. People came. It couldn't last. Jamukha gathered noble clans, promising the world as it had always been. Temüjin gathered the hungry, the ambitious, the men of small names and large talent. Their war wasn't just armies colliding, it was systems colliding. At the Battle of the 13 Sides, at Dalen Baljut, and in other brutal clashes, the old elite struck like a hammer, but the hammer hit water. Temüjin's army wasn't a single block, it was a living system. The decimal structure of tens, hundreds, and thousands, each unit drilled to act without waiting for a prince's permission. Mobility, discipline, shared purpose. Jamukha won followers by invoking birthright. Temüjin won them by offering a future. By 1206, the wars of unification reached their crescendo. The tribes gathered at a Kurultai, a grand council. There, the outcast boy who had escaped a wooden yoke was raised upon a felt carpet and proclaimed with a new name, Genghis Khan, Genghis Khan, universal ruler. Titles, though, are not magic, they are contracts. In that moment, Genghis Khan sealed a bargain with his people. I will carry you beyond the horizon, and you will ride as one. He had forged unity, but unity is not destiny, it is a tool. The question now was simple and terrifying. Where would he point it? The new Mongol state wasn't just a crowd under a banner. It was a system engineered for war and rule. The decimal units, Arban, 10, Jagun, 100, Mingan, 1,000, Tumen, 10,000, made every order cascade with clarity. Ambush, feigned retreat, encirclement. These were not tricks, they were habits. He built a relay of riders, the Yam, a nerve network pulsing across vast distances. Messages leapt from station to station, news moving faster than fear. And he promoted talent like a heat-seeking arrow. If you were brave, obedient, creative, you rose. If you were famous but useless, you fell. The steppe had taught him the wind favors no name, only the rider who leans into it. South lay the Jin Dynasty, rich, walled, confident. West lay the Khwarezm Empire, sprawling, proud, and soon to make the worst decision in its history. Genghis Khan had a united steppe behind him, and a machine tuned to speed and obedience. The world beyond the grasslands believed itself safe behind brick and law and money. They had no idea that the steppe had learned to think. In the next chapter, a caravan will arrive bearing gifts and leave the world on fire. A governor will choose cruelty and bring his empire to its knees. And a siege engine will speak a new language that walls cannot ignore. The year is 1218. Genghis Khan controls the steppe. But an empire cannot survive on grass and goats alone. It must trade, it must tax, it must feed its people not only with meat, but with silver and silk.
And so, the Mongols turned west to the Khwarezm Empire. Genghis sent a caravan, hundreds of merchants carrying fine goods, symbols of respect, and an unspoken message. We can be friends, trade can flow, let's profit together. But what happens when arrogance blinds a ruler to opportunity? The governor of Otrar, in Alchuk, accused the Mongols of spying. He seized the caravan, executed the merchants, and stole the goods. An insult, but more than that, a provocation. Still, Genghis Khan sent envoys, offering peace if only the governor was punished. The Shah of Khwarezm, Ala ad-Din Muhammad II, made a choice that would echo through history. He executed one envoy, shaved the beards of the others, and sent them back humiliated. For Genghis, this was not merely betrayal, it was a declaration of war. And war was a language he spoke better than any man alive. He gathered 200,000 riders, disciplined, hardened, fast as lightning. The Khwarezm Empire, larger on maps, had cities, fortresses, and armies, but it had no unity. The Mongols would tear it apart, one wall at a time. In 1220, the Mongols reached Bukhara. Its walls rose high, its garrison was confident, but confidence is brittle. The Mongols breached the outer defenses, stormed in, and seized the citadel. In the Mosque of Bukhara, Genghis Khan is said to have addressed the trembling people. "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." Whether exact or legend, the word spread like wildfire. Fear itself became his ally. Samarkand, the jewel of Central Asia, prepared for a fight. Tens of thousands of soldiers, elephants clad in armor, towers bristling with defenders. But numbers mean nothing when unity rots. The Mongols unleashed siege engines, scaling towers, flaming projectiles. Elephants panicked under fire, trampling their own men. The gates fell. Samarkand was taken. The Khwarezm Empire was unraveling city by city because its ruler had underestimated one truth. The Mongols were not raiders, they were architects of annihilation. Shah Muhammad fled his own empire. From city to desert, from fortress to island, he ran. Each time he looked back, the Mongols were closer. His subjects abandoned him. His soldiers melted away. He died on an island in the Caspian Sea, hunted and broken. An emperor without an empire, a king without a crown. By 1221, the Khwarezm Empire was no more. Entire cities erased, rivers rerouted, survivors scattered. The Mongols had turned a merchant caravan's murder into a war of obliteration. And in that fire, Genghis Khan's message to the world was clear. To betray the Mongols was to invite extinction. But this was only the beginning. To the east, the Jin Dynasty still loomed. To the west, princes in Russia whispered warnings. And to the south, the great Islamic cities of Baghdad and Damascus shone like tempting jewels. The storm had only gathered strength, and the world had not yet learned how to weather it. Before the Khwarezm Empire burned, the Mongols had already tasted battle with another giant, the Jin Dynasty of northern China, a state rich in silk and silver, defended by towering walls and backed by the arrogance of centuries.
To conquer it was not just a war. It was a test of whether the steppe could break the stone. The Jin Dynasty ruled from Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing. They believed their walls made them invincible. But walls do not stop hunger, and walls do not break the loyalty of riders who carry their world in their saddlebags. The Mongols had no need to batter every fortress. They would starve them, surround them, cut supply lines like silk threads in the night. And when the defenders grew weak, the horde would surge. In 1211, Genghis Khan led his forces against the Jin in the mountainous passes of Yehuling. The Jin had hundreds of thousands of troops, perhaps more. But numbers are blind when commanders are deaf. The Mongols drew the Jin army into a choke point, feigned retreat, and then, like a bowstring snapping, closed the trap. Arrows rained from the cliffs. Panic surged. The Jin army shattered. One of the greatest forces of its age had been broken in a single maneuver. By 1215, the Mongols reached Zhongdu. Inside, hundreds of thousands huddled in fear. Siege engines hurled stones, fire rained from the sky. Starvation gripped the city like a vice. When the walls finally fell, the Mongols unleashed devastation. Fires consumed streets. Survivors were enslaved. The capital of a dynasty, once thought untouchable, lay in ashes. But conquest was more than plunder. The Mongols learned. They absorbed Chinese engineers, siege masters, and bureaucrats into their ranks. Catapults, trebuchets, and city management became tools of the Mongol state. Genghis Khan was not only a conqueror, he was a collector of knowledge. Each campaign did not just expand his borders, it expanded his arsenal of ideas. By the 1220s, the Mongol Empire stretched farther than any living man could ride in a year. From the Pacific shores to the edges of Persia, the horsemen of the steppe were no longer shadows on the horizon. They were the storm itself. And the storm was about to test new ground. Russia, Eastern Europe, and even the distant lands of Christendom. What happens when a people who fear nothing ride against kingdoms that have never faced such speed, such ferocity, such cold strategy? And the next chapter, rivers will run with ice and blood. Princes will kneel or fall. And the Mongols will carve their name deeper into the world's memory. The Mongols had mastered the deserts of Persia and the walls of China, but to the north and west lay a different challenge. Frozen rivers, endless forests, and princes who believed their castles and crosses would protect them. They were wrong. In 1223, before Khwarezm was fully ashes, the Mongols tested the lands of the Rus. The princes of Kiev, Chernihiv, and others gathered to repel them at the Kalka River. The Rus had numbers, the Mongols had unity. The Mongols pretended to flee, the Rus followed, pride blinding them. Then the trap snapped shut. Surrounded, crushed, their princes captured. The victors celebrated by feasting over boards laid on their captives' bodies, suffocating them beneath the weight of triumph.
It was not just a defeat, it was a prophecy of what was coming. By the late 1230s, under Genghis Khan's sons and generals, the Mongols returned in force. They swept across the Rus like a blizzard with iron hooves. Ryazan fell, Vladimir fell. Kiev, once the proud mother of Rus cities, was reduced to ash in 1240. The pattern was relentless: surrender and live, resist and be erased. Entire towns learned the price of defiance. But the Mongols did not stop at the forests of Russia. They pushed westward, into the heart of Europe. In 1241, they struck Poland and Hungary. At the Battle of Legnica, European knights in heavy armor charged, confident that steel and faith would carry them. But the Mongols were smoke and speed. They encircled, outflanked, and annihilated their foes. The knights' strength became their weakness, their slowness, their inflexibility. The road to Western Europe lay open. Vienna, perhaps even Rome, seemed within reach. Christendom trembled. And then they turned back. Not because they were defeated, but because news had arrived from the east. Ögedei Khan, Genghis Khan's son and successor, was dead. Mongol law required a return. A new Kurultai, a great council, would choose the next great Khan. Europe, by fate's thread, was spared total conquest. But Europe had seen enough to understand. The Mongols were not simply horsemen from the east. They were a storm system that could appear anywhere, devour everything, and vanish. Their methods, discipline, speed, psychological terror were unlike anything the West had faced. And this was only one branch of the empire. While the Western Front burned, the heirs of Genghis Khan still looked south, toward the jewel of Islam, and east, toward the Song dynasty of China. In the next chapter, we'll see how Genghis Khan's death
did not end the storm, but unleashed it in 4 directions at once, as his descendants carried his vision to the edge of the known world. In 1227, Genghis Khan died. Some say he fell from his horse. Others whisper he was wounded in battle. His true resting place remains a mystery, hidden by loyal guards who killed anyone who saw the funeral procession. The man was gone, but the storm he unleashed was not. According to tradition, a Kurultai was called. His son Ögedei was chosen as Great Khan. Genghis had warned against splitting the empire too soon, and so at first unity held. Under Ögedei, the Mongols struck at the Jin Dynasty again, finally crushing it in 1234. The northern half of China now bowed to the horsemen of the steppe. But Ögedei also looked west, hungering for the riches of Europe. His generals thundered into Poland, Hungary, and beyond, until his death in 1241 pulled them back. Over time, the empire stretched too far to be ruled from one center. It divided into Great Khanates: the Yuan dynasty in China, ruled by Kublai Khan; the Ilkhanate in Persia; the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia; the Golden Horde in Russia and the steppes. This division did not mean collapse, not yet. It meant multiplication.
Each branch carried the Mongol system into new lands, reshaping politics, trade, and war across continents. The most famous of Genghis's grandsons was Kublai Khan. In 1271, he declared the Yuan dynasty, ruling all of China. He built his capital at Khanbalik, today's Beijing. He welcomed traders like Marco Polo, who carried tales of Mongol grandeur back to Europe. But Kublai was also more than a conqueror. He embraced administration, tax systems, and cultural blending. Under his rule, the Mongol Empire touched the farthest edge of legitimacy. It became not just an empire of conquest, but an empire of governance. In the north, the Golden Horde ruled Russia for centuries. The Rus princes paid tribute in silver and soldiers. The Horde's shadow shaped Moscow, forcing it to grow strong in resistance. Without Mongol pressure, Russia's rise might have taken a very different path. Even centuries later, Russian memory called it the Tatar yoke, a mark burned deep into identity. The Ilkhanate in Persia ruled Persia and the Middle East. At first, the Mongols devastated cities like Baghdad in 1258, ending the Abbasid Caliphate. The libraries, scholars, and treasures of the Islamic Golden Age were consumed in fire and flood. Yet in time, these conquerors converted to Islam, blending steppe traditions with Persian administration. The land healed, but it never forgot. With the empire stretched across Eurasia, the Mongols created something unexpected: peace, the Pax Mongolica. For a century, merchants traveled from China to Europe with greater safety than ever before. Silk, spices, inventions, and ideas crossed the steppes on the backs of camels and horses. Gunpowder, paper, and the compass all traveled faster because the Mongols opened the roads. Even disease like the Black Death moved along these veins, showing how connected the world had become. But unity is hard to maintain across continents. Rivalries between Khanates deepened. Local cultures absorbed the Mongols, even as they resisted them. What was once one empire became many, still powerful, but less invincible. The storm was beginning to break apart into scattered thunderheads, yet the echo of its roar still terrified kings and caliphs alike. In the final chapter, we will witness the twilight of Mongol power, the legacies they left behind, and why the story of their rise still matters to us today. Every empire has its rise and its fall.
For the Mongols, the fall did not come in a single battle, but in slow fractures. Brothers turned rivals, Khanates drifting apart, cultures absorbing conquerors who once seemed unyielding. In China, Kublai Khan's Yuan dynasty ruled as emperors, but luxury softened the steppe edge, corruption spread, rebellion stirred. By 1368, the Ming dynasty rose, sweeping the Mongols back into the northern grasslands. What had once been the center of the empire was lost. The Ilkhanate in Persia splintered into petty states. The Chagatai Khanate broke into factions. The Golden Horde, once iron over Russia, fractured and was pushed back by rising Muscovite power. The empire that once stretched from the Pacific to Europe was now a memory drawn on maps. One man, Timur, Tamerlane, rose in the 14th century claiming descent from Genghis Khan. His conquests briefly revived the terror of Mongol might, but he was not the Khan who united tribes, he was the warlord who built on ruins. His empire too fell, leaving only shards of fear and legend. And yet, the Mongols changed the world. They smashed the walls of isolation between East and West.
They spread technologies, foods, and ideas across continents. They carried the compass, gunpowder, and paper money into Europe. They shattered the old powers and cleared the ground for new nations to rise. But they also left scars. Cities burned, populations erased, rivers diverted. To this day, their name carries both awe and terror. The Mongols remind us of a truth. Power does not always come from where we expect. A boy abandoned in the snow can rise to command the world. An empire built on speed, trust, and fear can topple kingdoms thought eternal. Their story is not just history, it is a warning. Civilizations fall when they underestimate what outsiders have learned from hardship. And sometimes, the greatest empires are born not in palaces, but in tents. This has been the untold story of the Mongol Empire's rise, the storm that reshaped history. If this journey through forgotten power has gripped you, subscribe now to Secrets of History, where we bring the past alive with every tale. And if you're ready for another chapter of lost knowledge, click right here to watch The Library of Alexandria, history's greatest loss of knowledge, a treasure of wisdom erased in flame, waiting for you to uncover its mystery.